Professor Glaser, can you tell us the truth about COVID in your opinion?
I think there are many truths. We have to start from the beginning of a virus in the same family, coronavirus, as SARS, arising, which we think from Wuhan in China, whether it escaped from a laboratory or whether it was made, whether the information was purposely suppressed. We have no real answers to its origin, whether it in fact was a host of the bats in the market there. We don't know that, so there's no fact or truth to know about its exact origin. We only know the city it originated in. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have not resolved in any way what was the correct way of managing what became a pandemic, an infection in practically every country of the world, the four corners of the world, from complete lockdown in Australia and New Zealand to masses of people being infected in the Indian subcontinent. So, one, we don't know its origin. Two, we don't know how to manage it. And three, we don't know where this is going to end. What we do know is the socio-economic consequences of it, and even these are unknown. Countries have spent billions and billions of pounds in supporting their economies, and nobody's quite sure what impact this will have on the global economy. Now, I know I'm answering this in very economic, socio-economic, global political terms rather than scientific terms, but that is where we are. And I don't believe that any scientist or any group of scientists advising any government in the world are sure that their advice is correct, that what they have done so far is correct, or maintaining the status quo is correct. Because what we are seeing in what is evolving situations in every country, whether vaccinated, non-vaccinated, isolated, lockdowns or no lockdowns. As an example, will the death rates be different in Louisiana and California, who had a more open approach, to those in New York, where they locked people up? So there are so many questions which only years, maybe never, will tell us if we have behaved correctly, we have managed the pandemic correctly, or we have made mistakes. The other question is how much we will learn about both the etiology and the scientific significance of viruses and the future of vaccination and the future of those technologies used in the vaccination process.
Professor Glaser, do you think the scientists have been advising the politician correctly?
I think we have seen varied advice throughout the world. I mean, at one extreme, you had this extreme lockdown in New Zealand, which was, of course, unique because New Zealand is far away from everywhere, a small country, a small population. You let nobody in or out. You're not going to expose anybody to a viral disease, to other people's advice. And I think this story and this conflict of advice has been quite illuminating, where you had in the White House with the Trump administration the head of virology and the CDC, and disagreement between them and experts in the States. As regards the United Kingdom, where they had this sage advising the government, I think the government got all sorts of different advice. There was no doubt that the government got the factual advice as these scientists saw it. But one must imagine it wasn't based on previous clinical experience. It was based some of it was based on some clinical experience of viral disease, but it was based on modeling. And all modeling can be correct or not correct. So we had this disparity of forecasting that there would be from 450,000 deaths to 20 to 30,000 deaths. If this scenario and that scenario, we had advice about different ethnic groups. I believe the scientists behaved honestly to their bias and the extent of knowledge that they had, but they may not have understood a complete picture. Although you had, of course, clinicians such as the esteemed and the person I respect so much, medical officer of health, communicating into government, there was no doubt muddled advice and mistakes were made. And I mean, it seemed quite obvious to me that if you have an epidemic of anything, you manage the vulnerable people first, and this didn't happen. That the elderly population and the people over 80s, they were not pinpointed straight away, and they should have been the population that should have been first helped and dealt with and isolated. And I think the advice evolved when it became apparent that the vaccines may work. But we have another factor. We don't know how long the vaccines work for, which is a new factor. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this interesting. And if you did, please subscribe.